Good morning. Welcome to Key Questions for Key Staffers here at the town of Fort Myers Beach. My name is Jim Atterholt. I'm the Vice Mayor for the town. And the purpose of our show is to find subject experts who can help convey key information points, particularly as it relates to Hurricane Ian's recovery, and convey them to the people. Abraham Lincoln once said, "Let the people know the facts and the country will be saved." And this is our small attempt to do this. And our goal is to partner with our friends in the media, people at Beach Talk Radio, the Observer, the news press, the local TV stations, for them to link and or show this program to help us get the word out. Obviously, it will be posted on all the town's social media platforms. But one of the things we've also had success with is that we've asked folks who are on Facebook, if they like the content, they find it to be helpful, please share it or link to it on your Facebook page to help us get the word out. We have a special guest with us this morning, AniTa who won't be unknown to many of our viewers, and rightfully so. I'm very thankful that she was here to join us. She is here to join us. AniTa, thank you. Welcome. Good to have you here.
Happy to be here. Very happy to be here.
AniTa has worn many hats over the years, but currently she's wearing a very important hat as chair of the LPA, the local planning agency, which really it's in state statute that every community in Florida has to have one of these, and it's in essence our zoning board, our planning board. But given the Hurricane Ian dynamic, it's become even more important as the town council has asked them to take on even a greater role as we work on our recovery process. One of the things I always like to talk with AniTa about is she has a great historical perspective of the island. And as we begin to kind of talk about Hurricane Ian recovery and what that looks like, what the plan for recovery would be like, I want to talk a little bit about our history because that helps us get to where we are today. AniTa, it's so interesting to see the dynamics of the town grow and mature. And one of the things that's been interesting to me is how the town actually became a town. As many folks know, Lee County, the Lee County Commission, the Lee County Commissioners oversee unincorporated parts of Lee County. They don't have jurisdiction over the town or the city of Fort Myers or Sanibel or Bonita Springs. We were originally unincorporated and part of Lee County and basically governed by Lee County Commissioners until 1995 when the town passed a referendum to become a town. Now, apparently the town had tried numerous times before that.
I think seven or eight
times to become a town unsuccessfully. But there was something in 1995 that helped push us over the edge to become a town.
Diamond Head Hotel.
I want you to talk a little bit about that.
It was an interesting year, 1995, because what was happening was the Sunstream developers, who they turned out to be great corporate citizens to the town, as you well know. They've been wonderful friends, but they were the enemy. They were the enemy because the county was vacating right-of-way and roads, some of the same things that we did for Margaritaville, and giving variances for height. And so when Diamond Head was being constructed, there was just opposition from day one about the vacations of the road on the side. I'm trying to think what the name of that road was, but I can't remember. And of course, I can't remember anything these days.
No, but they were asking for a list of exceptions.
They asked for a lot of exceptions, and especially the exception to height, which is why if you look at the town's preoccupation with height, that's what it stems from, because it was all about, look how high this is. And so anyhow, there was one fateful night when the Civic Association, who was led then by an extraordinary gentleman named Ted Fitzsimons, he rallied the troops and everyone went to the public hearing for one of the variances or whatever that Diamond Head was looking for at the moment at the County Commission chambers. And that space well. The chambers were filled. The balcony was full. The hallway was full. There were so many people there. I don't remember exactly what time public comment began, 3 minutes at a time, but I spoke at 11:30 at night. If I wasn't the last speaker, I was one of the last speakers. That's how long people stood and waited and said what we had to say, which was, hey, why are you imposing this on our little island? it was the straw that broke the camel's back, and it gave, people rally around something to fight against. It's much easier to fight against something than it is to think of something proactively, right? So Diamond Head became the fight. It became the flag to wave for the incorporation. And that summer of 1995, in July, there was a mail-out ballot. That's how the vote was accomplished. The Civic Association drove that movement. Ultimately, decided at first it was going to be the whole 33931 zip code. Ultimately, decided that where the votes really were was Estero Island. So they drew 1,000-foot border around the island and said, "This is what we're going to incorporate." And there you have it.
What
succeeded.
What preceded that vote was the county commissioners supported against
Diamond
the will of the people of Fort Myers Beach at that time.
Oh, it was so, now look, I have, and so have you, been sitting in one of those chairs many times when people are raging about something, and the answer is no. You can't help them. You can't do what they want you to do because you're looking at it differently, right? In this particular case, it was almost like the residents had no standing. We had no authority. We had no relevance. I mean, look, what was Fort Myers Beach to Lee County?
So AniTa, if height was a concern, all the condos that face the Gulf, those taller condos, how did those were those approved under the Lee County as well?
Yes, they were. So, and many of the things, as a matter of fact, the first zoning case that the town had was the Edison Beach House. The Edison Beach House got additional height because they vacated property to the town. But since that time, from the time that our comp plan was adopted, which was 1999, from the moment that comp plan was adopted, height, there were two mantras for council members and the community: commercial intrusion into residential neighborhoods and height, which, over the years, a million times I've said, I'm going to use your piece of paper. I have said, look, if this is the box that you get to build, what difference does it make if it's this or if it's this? When it's this, and people are down here, you're limiting your view to the water or to anything. When it's this, you're creating more space because the experience of a human being down here to this or this is the same. But anyhow, those things 20 years later.
And we'll get into this in more detail, but given the height issue, you hear a lot of folks saying all these empty spaces, tragically as a result of Ian, are going to be high-rise condos. That isn't going to be what happens. That's not what's allowed.
It's prohibited unless
there's a variance of some sort.
Correct. There's a variance of some sort, and I think that if there is a variance, which means a diversion from what the rule is, and if that were to happen, the property owner would have to do something for the public. Would have to do something for
benefit.
Exactly. It'd have to be any of a number of things. It could be parking. It could be workforce housing. It could be any of a number of things.
Just briefly, I wanted to. Hurricane Charlie occurred in 2004. That was the last. There's been a number of hurricanes, but that was the last substantial hurricane before Ian on Fort Myers Beach. You were here. What was that like, and what lessons were to be learned from Charlie that could help us with Ian today, or is the scale just dramatically different of the hit?
You started out with Abraham Lincoln's quote about communication, essentially, right? To let people know what's happening. That was the biggest lesson of Hurricane Charlie. And I think, again, it was a huge lesson for Hurricane Ian. The most important thing for any community is for the residents to know what's going on. Even if it's bad news, right. Just tell me. Let me know. And show me, even better, if you can show them, as opposed to just tell them. But I think that this Hurricane Ian pales in comparison to Hurricane Charlie.
What about the rebuild part of Charlie? Were there certain things that we can learn from as we rebuild post Ian that we could learn from Charlie, or wasn't this with
It
destruction?
wasn't. No,
So
it wasn't. Honestly, Jim, Hurricane Charlie was more of a cleanup.
Yeah.
It was just, I mean, I remember the first day we were allowed to come onto the island. I was staying in Naples, and I came on from the south end. And Lover's Key was a massive, as it is now, and like over at Bay Oaks, a huge mountain of debris. And from there to Times Square, I just cried the whole way because there was just so much loss, but the loss was stuff. The loss wasn't buildings. So we didn't lose what we lost in the storm.
And I asked that, Anita, because when the Margaritaville debate was going on, there was a kind of a depressed area that Margaritaville filled that void.
Oh, those old hotels, sure.
So
yes, you're right.
Was that a result
Yes,
of
it was.
Charlie though destroying
I
those?
totally forgot thinking about that. When something's gone for a while, you forget it was there. But you're absolutely right. From the time that Hurricane Charlie came through, there were some beachside hotels, the Eventide. Oh gosh, I'm trying to think of what the other ones were. They were owned by a very nice man from Canada. Several of them were. And they never recuperated. They never came back. And so ultimately they were torn down. The county acquired the Parkside portion, and what was Seafarers, that whole zone. So yes, that was absolutely what was termed blighted, depressed.
Why did it lay fallow for so many years?
Oh, we had a lot of scoundrels come through here, Jim. Lots of people with big plans, but no ability to manifest them. And also, look, when Hurricane Charlie happened, everything was kind of like moving along, and then Hurricane Charlie happened, and the brakes were put on politically. It was a time of, no, we're not going to do that. No, you can't build that. No, you can't have a variance. And I don't mean any disrespect to any of the folks that were on the council at the time. It's just it was a time of stop for a minute.
Right.
And then relative to redevelopment downtown, that stop really hindered developers and people who would have been interested in coming to town to do something from approaching. And then when they did approach, the plans were convoluted. And I mean, I at one point when TPI at the time started coming around, I mean, I started pulling out plans I had from all of these other plans, from all of these other developers, and looking at them going, what were they thinking? I mean, what Tom ultimately did, freeing up the beachside, was brilliant.
So as we look at it, and I watched this as a relatively new resident to Fort Myers Beach, I watched really just enraptured the LPA hearing, the council hearing. There were numerous
enraptured.
I really
Jim.
was. No, it was riveting because these developers had tried for so many different times, so long, and finally through community input and good work on the council, they built a consensus of the community supporting it. And people won't know this, and Anita will brush me back on this, but Anita, who wasn't in leadership, she was on the council, but she wasn't in a leadership position on the council. I watched this as a student of politics. She literally, through her own gifts of conciliation, grace, encouragement, she brought that council together, and it was a 5-0 vote for Margaritaville because of Anita's various gifts. No, I'm serious when I say that. But I guess what I ask you that not to blow you smoke, but to say, what do we need to, as we go forward, we're going to have some potentially large swaths of land that'll be redeveloped on our island, learning from what Margaritaville went through, and what during their struggles, but also when they were successful. What do we need to be thinking about to make that work much more? Nobody wants to go through that Margaritaville nightmare again, I'm sure, including the Margaritaville people.
Are you talking about the lawsuit portion of it?
No, I'm talking about just the various plans that were put forth initially.
Well, there's only two.
Only two, okay.
Yeah, there was only two. So the first one got, it was just, the first one was complicated by, I'm just going to say, other interests.
Okay.
But what I think that Tom Torgerson and his team did, they set a bar that showed potentially other developers, look, if you've got a good idea and you really want to be part of the community, here's how you do it. And what you do is, like he did, I mean, he brought people in in a focus group who were opposed to his development. So he knew, okay, what do I need to work on? What his outreach and his understanding of Fort Myers Beach, and when I say his, I mean his entire team, the effort that they made to communicate with this town and this community was unprecedented. In previous years, everybody had their plan and they held it so close because it was a secret and they didn't want anybody to know and somebody might disagree. And Tom and his team did just the opposite. They said, here's what we want to do, Fort Myers Beach. We want to be part of your community. How can we make this better?
And Anita, why this is so important. I'm not interested in relitigating the past, but there's a lot of really interesting ideas out there for redevelopment for this island post-Ian, and I want them to learn from the successes of park redevelopment.
Be truthful, be straight with the public. You can't fool the people of Fort Myers Beach. You just can't fool them. Be straight about what you want to do. When you come to the LPA is assembled now. I mean, there's an attorney, there's engineers, there's a realtor, there's small business people, and there's me. And I mean, it's a really stellar group. But so you're not going to pull anything over, and all the hoopla of a presentation. If at the core of it you are honest and straightforward with what you want to do, and you're reasonable, then I think the town will embrace you.
I love that, and I think it's so important for folks who may be watching, because even if you're not in the redevelopment business, you're talking to people who are. You're hearing rumors about various redevelopment.
The rumors, and the rumors are so. They're disastrous. I mean, I remember saying when the storm first hit, please, dear God, let it have killed the coconut telegraph, but it didn't.
No, it didn't.
It did not.
But at the same time, I have had the privilege of meeting with a number of these folks, and the ideas that I'm hearing, Anita, are so spectacular for our island. I'm so encouraged about the future of Fort Myers Beach.
In what way are they spectacular?
I think a couple things. Number one, the capital, because obviously someone's going to have to invest a lot of money to rebuild on these, particularly some of these sites. But the money is not coming from out of the country. It's not really even coming from out of state in most parts. It's coming from people who either have immediate ties to Fort Myers Beach or immediate ties to Southwest Florida, who are connected to Fort Myers Beach in some way or another, and they love Fort Myers Beach.
Well, that's interesting.
They want to do it right because it's their legacy, and those who are selling want to sell to folks who want to do it right. I've been so encouraged by some of the families, some of the people that have had experience on the island who are interested in investing. And I'm sure there'll probably be some exceptions to this, but from what I'm hearing, the people I'm talking to, the visions are magnificent. Now, it's so interesting, and we'll talk about a little bit more about this. When I was in my previous life in government in Indiana, at relatively high levels, I was involved in a lot of economic development. And the paradigm shift from Fort Myers Beach to Indiana or Ohio, where corporations would come to Indiana, or we would invite them to come here to relocate a headquarters, relocate a plant, whatever, bring jobs to Indiana. Here's the conversation would go, what do you all want? Do you want workforce training? Do you want tax credits? Do you want infrastructure improvements?
That's Indiana saying that to
Indiana saying that to the developer. When developers come to Fort Myers Beach, the converse is true. It's like, what can we do how can we help the community? And the whole paradigm is reversed. Now, you have to be careful with that because you want to make sure that what our ask is a public benefit, not some axe that one individual has to grind or whatever. It can't be an extortion-like dynamic. But you clearly have to, because the land and the variance that you're asking for, a special exception, is so important. In return for that ask, there has to be a public benefit.
I think it's going to be extraordinarily important for you and the council and the LPA to define what public benefit means, because what it means to you and me may not be what it means to somebody who lives or just moved onto Pearl Street, or somebody who is getting ready to rebuild the outrigger.
That's a very fair point.
So
Yeah.
I mean, it is because we use that term a lot.
Yeah, and here's how I've been using it with some of these developers. There's obviously going to be architectural standards. People don't. It's very clear. People don't want cookie cutter. People want an eclectic island. They want it to resemble what it looked like before, which is going to be challenging given some of the changes that are coming into effect, particularly
They'll just have to come to
invoked
my
by
house
FEMA.
if they want to see what it looked like before.
So, but that's the challenge, and so I think one of the things that I'm asking these developers, redevelopers, I prefer that term because they really are redevelopments, is to consider. This is one of the things that I'm pushing hard. Is we have a once in a lifetime chance, quite honestly, to address our traffic issue. So first of all, if you want additional density, which I understand some of these smaller hotels are going to need more density in order to make their business model work, because to rebuild a hotel, the cost, the insurance, all the other dynamics is extremely high, and you can't rebuild some of these smaller hotels unless you have a few more rooms to make the business model work. I get that. So in return for that, my ask is, first of all, do no harm on the traffic front. Do not exacerbate our traffic problems. We have serious traffic problems. But also look for innovative ways to improve the traffic challenge. We'll never solve it completely, but I refuse to acknowledge that there's nothing we can do about it. There is things we can do about it. For example, I've said to a number of people who are interested in the Times Square development, Monty Kai, Red Coconut, I want a pedestrian overpass over Estero Boulevard. I want people to go over Estero Boulevard so we do not obstruct the flow of traffic. I would love to see shuttle services to the airport. I would love to see ways to get on and off Estero Boulevard, or utilize a side street so you're not slowing traffic. I would love to see people be able to rent bikes at that facility. I'd love to see there's a perspective idea on the bay that is really will knock your socks off.
I can't wait to hear
And
that.
I've said to these folks, if you're going to have this increased density on the bay, what about a water ferry that will stop at the various marinas throughout the island, potentially even across the bay, and pick people up and shuttle people? Because imagine getting on. Think about all the residential folks on the south end of the island who could walk to the Fishtail Marina, hop on some kind of a water ferry, and it would take you down to the north end of the island. You'd have dinner, watch the sunset, have the ambiance of being on the bay. It would take you home. You could walk back to your condo or home, and then you're never getting in your car. And these people, the lights went off, and I know people have talked about this for years, but lights went off
Since the very beginning.
we would love to do that. And imagine having the private sector run that water ferry as opposed to the town or the government doing it. And I just think there's so many clever ways to address the traffic challenge. That's one of my asks in terms of public benefit, just by way of example. I'm sure there's a litany of them, workforce housing, there's a lot of things, architecture that people want. I don't want to get in the business of telling what color shutters to have, because I think if we get into that business, then we lose the eclectic nature of the island. Everything starts to look standard and uniform. And some of that may appeal to some people. I love the eclectic nature of the island, and I want to have that variety. But anyways, enough of that. But I think that's an important piece, because we talk about we need a plan, we need a vision. But like you said, that means so much. That means so many different things to so many different people.
It does.
As you envision a plan for the future post the end, how do you envision that term, a plan or a vision?
I've given a lot of thought to, I think in order to, if you're thinking about the future, you have to know where you've been. So I know where we've been, and I am very grateful to be in a position where I can help move us to the future. But thinking about just talking with Ed now the other day, and we had a Zoom meeting with Dan and
As the consultant who's redoing the comprehensive plan.
Yes, that's right.
And let's just for our viewers, the comprehensive plan is this. It's an interesting document. It's kind of an overview of what, in a perfect world, what we would like Fort Myers Beach to look like. We have one now, and I have to confess, not a lot of people know what's in it or have seen it or pay much attention to it.
It won awards.
It did win awards. It was very well done. But my point is that as we redo the comp plan, it'll be an education process for everyone as to what a comp plan is and what goes in it and what its impact is.
Well, a comprehensive plan, when you become a town, a city, or whatever, you are mandated by the state of Florida to accomplish a plan within 3 years of your incorporation, and it's adopted by ordinance, so it's a law. It's not just an idea, and And our comp plan is aspirational. Our comp plan defines Fort Myers Beach as a living, breathing park. In our comp plan, it says that we shall acquire beachfront property when it becomes available for the benefit of the public. Now, there's a whole heck of a lot of it available right now. Is the town in a position to acquire that property? I don't think so. Maybe so. Maybe there would be some little nugget somewhere that you could have another little park someplace for the benefit of the public. That would be wonderful. But our comp plan is aspirational in that sense, talking about how important it was to us in 1995 to 2000 to engage people in a community. It was also important to us to have a walkable community for the traffic benefit. But to that, and as we were discussing in this other meeting, we also talked so much about commercial intrusion, when the ultimate commercial intrusion into residential neighborhoods were short-term rentals. But at the time, that just wasn't a thing. There was no Airbnb in 1998. There was no VRBO. So it wasn't something we thought about. What it ended up being was really that, as we all know who live in neighborhoods that have rentals, it changes the whole dynamic of your neighborhood. If I had a magic wand and I could shift that, I would.
Well, and on the commercial intrusion front,
yeah,
that paradigm has shifted a little bit too, because
sure.
I live in a condo across from Santini Plaza, and quite honestly, we rarely have to get in our car. We've got a CVS, we've got places to eat, we've got places to buy clothing, we've got all kinds of things. There's a hardware store there. I rarely have to. I can walk everywhere. There's a farmer's market. It's wonderful. And so this concept of having, as long as it's done right and it's done in sort of partnership with the neighborhoods, having a little coffee shop, a little restaurant in the neighborhood is not always a bad thing, particularly if it's done in concert with the neighborhood.
Well, we fought it. Yeah. So the thing about Publix, the leader of the incorporation movement, who became the first vice mayor of the town, Ted Fitzsimons, resigned over Publix because he felt so strongly that was the wrong move. He felt so strongly about it. But talking to the planner the other day, he said, I don't understand how you all could talk so much about making your community walkable and not creating pods. Like you said,
I've seen this plan. Yeah, it's very interesting.
You want to go here, where every neighborhood or every zone of the island should have something that they can go to. And just like old cities in Europe, you don't walk a block that there's not a bar or a coffee shop or something. And so people stay in their little areas, or they walk to another area, but it is all walkable for that very reason.
Well, when I lived, before we came down to Florida, I lived in Indianapolis across from the state capitol. And we had an apartment that was literally, the whole first floor was a major grocery store.
There you go.
You could take your elevator down with your cart, fill up your groceries, go back up to your apartment.
Hank and Marge live in a condo in Chicago, and their first floor is a grocery store. I thought that was the coolest thing.
Awesome. If I lived near Publix today and I could walk to the grocery, that would be spectacular.
Yeah.
So this is the kind of concept that we're thinking about as an LPA, as a council. We're looking for innovative ways to get people out of their cars, make quality of life decisions that, again, for our redeveloper friends who are coming to the island, we welcome you. We thank you for risking your capital on our island. But at the same time, think about these things that AniTa and I have been talking about. And for those of you who are talking to these redevelopers, we need them. We welcome their interest. But at the same time, we're not looking for an adversarial relationship. We want to have a partnership. And that sometimes that public benefit that we've been talking about can actually benefit the proprietor as well. And so it doesn't have to be a one-way street. So as we look in the future, and I had a chance to kind of send off the LPA when they had their first meeting post-Ian, and I really, on behalf of the council, really asked them to, the LPA used to, and sometimes they would lead on issues, usually they would be given an agenda of things that the town needed, and there's some variances, special exceptions, and they made some really tough decisions, do a lot of the really heavy lifting on zoning. But now we've asked the LPA, because the council really is swamped with a lot of different challenges, to help lead on this rebuilding effort. Because AniTa and I actually talked early on about having an ad hoc committee, but because of sunshine laws and so forth, the LPA, particularly because of its talented makeup and because of its statutory role, has kind of become that entity now that help the council, help the community, sort of set those priorities, help us formulate that plan. And I'm just curious, as the chair of the LPA now, have you ever been chair of the LPA before?
I have.
Have you really?
Yes.
I did not know that. I know you're on the LPA.
During short-term rentals,
Oh, okay.
when we created that whole thing.
But your vision for your role of the LPA, help people understand what your vision of that role will be going forward post Ian, particularly as it relates to Ian recovery.
So, I'm a very friendly person, and yet in a meeting, a meeting is a place where you are meant to accomplish the work of your agency, whether it's the town council, the local planning agency, Tom, Dick, and Harry Club. You're there to do a job. The interaction with the public is important, but you're there to accomplish tasks. I've told at least 20 people in the last month. They said, well, I can't get to the meeting. Going to a meeting to appeal to you or to me or to anybody else who sits at one of these tables is the worst place in the world to talk to them. Catch them at Publix, call them on their phone. That's where you need to be talking to people about what your issues are and your problems, not necessarily in a public meeting. So that's one thing that I try to keep it focused on what the agenda is, but I also, because like you said, the talent, Pat Vaness, he's a planner by nature. To have a planner on our board is fantastic.
Amazing, yeah.
It is, it's amazing. And so I have been just trying to find in each agenda a piece, like you said, architectural standards, design standards. We shied away from that 25 years ago. We're not going to shy away from it now. It's public benefit. We need to define it. I'm going to ask at our next meeting that we start talking about what does that mean? What does it mean? And maybe public benefit is different in a commercial area than it is on where I lived at Jefferson Street. What would the public benefit be? What would the public benefit be for the redevelopment of the Red Coconut? What does that look like? And maybe it's different in different parts of the island. I don't know, but it's something that I think we need to define quickly and thoughtfully, because it's going to be a key element to our discussions with all of this redevelopment. And I'm excited about it. Everybody people say, oh, but we lost this, we lost. Listen, I lost a lot, everything. But if I focus on that, I can't see the future. And there are times where I'm overwhelmed with what happened, literally overwhelmed by it. But when I start to think about my passion for this community and the passion of people like you and Dan and Karen and everybody, Bill, good Lord. When I think about that, and look, I have goosebumps, and I think about moving to the future, I'm excited and enthusiastic and encouraged that we will have the force necessary to restore this community.
I love that, Anita. One other little aside that struck me when you were talking about giving people advice about the process. When I served on the LPA, which was a fabulous experience prior to being on the council, is one of the things I would encourage people. If the land development code, which is kind of our rule book, doesn't allow you to do something, and you want to come to the town, to the LPA and or the town council for a variance, which you have every right to do, my advice to folks is get to know your neighbors, because as someone who sat on the LPA, the folks that would sometimes come, and they would have all of the neighbors around them in support of them and have letters if they couldn't be there, and they had this great synergy with their neighbors. That was great. It was a no-brainer. Now our attorney would say that shouldn't matter as much as it matters a lot to me. But if you have neighbors who you've never met before show up on that day because they're going to get a letter that something's going to go on. You've never met them. You've not given them a heads up. You've not explained to them what's going to happen. That's going to create problems. And just a piece of advice to our citizenry is they do rebuild, and they may need some help with setbacks. They may have a unique situation. They need a variance. we're not hard-hearted. I know the LPA and the council would be sympathetic to that, but it does help a lot to be in sync with your neighbors because their property values. I'm all for property rights.
Listen, it helps to be in sync. Period.
Agreed. That's a good policy in general, of course. But we talk. It's so interesting. And Anita and I don't always agree on everything, but tell you what, we talk about property rights, and I get that, and I'm a big property rights person. But your neighbors have property rights too, and local government is so interesting to me. And I'm thankful that our council is nonpartisan because it's you've got the property rights of all the neighbors around the property holder as well. So it's trying to find that balance between the two. It's always a challenge, and it's not a partisan issue. It's a but if the neighbors can get along and if they can work in tandem with each other, it sure makes the process easier when you need an exception or variance.
So much easier. Because the last thing in the world you want is a bunch of people yelling and screaming, which of course is something you don't tolerate in a public meeting anyway. It's not gonna. Being mean and disgruntled, it just doesn't get you anywhere. It gets you absolutely nowhere. Being confrontational, it gets you nowhere. It's much better just to be kind and courteous, and if the answer is yes, it's yes, and if it's no, well, let's go for round two.
Now, Anita, I should have closed the show with your last speech because you gave a great encouraging speech, but I tried to close the show just getting a little bit of background about I shouldn't say this, but everybody knows Anita. But for those who don't know you,
share. For God's sake,
you have like a one day word. So, but you have this great connection with this community. But for those who don't know you, I mean, you went through this storm. Your home was severely damaged. It was a ground level home, an old historic home, and then you've had 3 businesses that were really, one's right across from where I live. I was there the day after the storm talking to you on the phone about it. And it was just so
grateful for that.
No, but it was so stunning to see someone who's been hit, and a lot of folks have been hit. But you experienced it on both your personal and your business front. Talk a little bit about how you're coping, and also what your plan is business wise for the future. If you're in a position to talk about it.
How I am coping.
Better explain to people too, but what your background is in terms of. Yeah.
So I had 2 stores in Times Square. The Pier Peddler was, on a parcel that held the Dairy Queen and the Pierside Grill. The Pier Peddler celebrated its 38th anniversary in December.
Wow.
So 37 solid years of being in business. I heard a friend of mine in my head one day saying, "How could you be anything but grateful for that?" And she's right. How could I be anything but grateful for the visitors, the customers, the friends, the family, the salespeople, everything that was brought to the Pier Peddler was nothing but, I told people for many years, 3 stores, if you could only keep one, which would it be? And it would have been the Pier Peddler. It's the one that stings the most to be gone because absolutely. Because my folks opened that in 1985. I do not have, I have no idea what will happen with that business. Local color, there's lots of options for. And so I'm enthusiastically keeping the doors open for local color. Not necessarily in the same location, could be someplace else.
Local color was also in Times Square.
Local color was also in Times Square. And then Santini Plaza was the Islander, which I opened in 2017. And that store really became like a hub for people who lived, I would say, from Public South. And
by the way, our personal finances have been benefited by your closing. But my wife is very excited about you regaining a presence.
I'm really excited. Yeah. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. The property owner at Santini Plaza is aggressively moving forward.
Any timeline on Santini Plaza at this point?
He has told us with all the gods, shining down favorably upon us, maybe April or May
of this year.
Yeah, but in a worst case scenario, the fall of turning the space over to us to do. So at the holidays, I went at Christmas with my family. I said, you know what? This time next year, I am going to be in the Islander. I'm going to be in that store. So I have great great hope for that. And what's been also extraordinary, when you're in business this long, your salespeople become like family members too. Because to me, everything is about relationships. The town, everything you do here is about a relationship with someone. Somebody might say, well, that keeps, you have to stay, objective. How the heck are you objective about a place that you're so passionate about?
Right.
No. So, and relationships don't necessarily mean that you're jaded or predisposed to somebody. It just means that you care about what the outcome
You have an
is.
empathy.
Absolutely. So, my salespeople have been all very, very supportive. I'm told a funny story about a door that I ordered in January. It was delivered in October for local color, a $10,000 door. Sanibel Glass over on Sanibel did it. I said, what am I supposed to do with this door? I honestly haven't heard from them. I think they're trying to find somebody to buy the door because they're in the same boat I'm in. God bless them. But so I am very hopeful about the prospects of business on Fort Myers Beach. My home is going to meet the 50% threshold. The principal part of my home were fishing cottages from the Pine Island Sound brought to the island in 1950, but the structures are from 1926. When the structural engineer went out there, he said, AniTa, it's going to take a lot more than a hurricane to tear down your house. And that was wonderful news, but we're moving into month number 4. And if you went in there right now, Jim, you would just go, oh. And yet it still feels like at the Times Square, light up Times Square that night, so many people were there, and so many people said to me, even though the buildings aren't here, you can still feel it. Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing. Anita, you and I have talked a little bit about it. I got frustrated with some folks who were predicting a 5-year to 7-year recovery. And it's a lot of it's semantics and how you frame it.
Sure.
But I was so concerned about some of our older residents in their 70s and 80s who are hearing this 5-7 years and they're thinking,
they can't see that.
I can't see it. I'm going to go do something else. We're going to lose some of our key residents. Not to mention, some of our visitors are going to hear that. And they're going to go somewhere else and they have an experience, let's say in Sarasota, and all of a sudden they start developing memories there, then they're less likely to come back. So I just went with all the hotels that are opening, with the condos that'll be opening, and with Margaritaville opening in less than a year, and all the restaurants opening, I was putting out this message, and I still am, that we will have a functional paradise within a year. And your news on Santini Plaza is so encouraging, and I'm hearing from the churches, from the redevelopment people that are so positive right now that we're going to be blown up. You, rightfully so, kind of corrected me a little bit on the housing front, because some of these have the housing challenges in terms of getting your insurance. You've been doing everything right. I've been following all what you're doing.
Oh, the housing is so difficult.
But that's going to probably, for some people now, some of the short term, because I've had to rent, because our condo is going to be out for probably less than a year. So I've been learning that more and more housing is coming available on the short term rental side. But in your housing, you're a pretty good indicator for you to be back in your home and things be quote unquote normal again. Is it a 2-year process?
No, I'm shooting for, and my contractors are shooting for November. Now
remember,
yes. Now remember something weird about my. And listen, I have been super. I don't know why. I always have been, including my flood adjuster. His name was Wayne Milliam. My God, I'll be friends with him my whole life. Kindest, most wonderful man. But anyhow. My contractors think that they said to me, what's your expected timeline? I said, I'd like to cook Thanksgiving dinner here in my home next year. And they said, I mean this year now, because it was next year.
Oh my gosh.
And they said, okay, but now my house is all wood and there's not a lot of finishing work to do on my house. It's not like, I think a lot of the challenges that I'm hearing right now, Jim, are condos. So I have friends at the north end of the island that are being told their condo will not be habitable until 2024. And this is a 90-year-old that heard this.
Oh, well, let me just say, as someone who lives in the condo community, it is a tremendous challenge to get the electrical panels. The supply, and the elevators are also a huge challenge.
Huge challenge.
All of our elevators get to replace electrical panels. but we're going to get there. We're going to get there probably within a year. I just think we're going to have a functional paradise for next season. And there's doesn't
Did
mean
you see how many people were on the beach on New
it's
Year's Eve?
unbelievable. The resilience. We got people down here that have been camping next to their property since the storm. The people are so tough around here.
Yeah.
So resilient.
It's not even tough. It is love. So are people going to go someplace else? Yes. They're going to go to Siesta Key and St. Petersburg and Clearwater and Anna Maria and all those places that are somewhat similar to Fort Myers Beach. But Fort Myers Beach has a magic something.
It does.
And look, I got goosebumps again. And if they're gone for a year, just like with COVID, if they're gone, they are coming back because there's nothing like this place.
There's nothing like it.
There's nothing like this.
Let's end on that beautiful note. AniTa, Saracita, thank you for being with us. Thanks for watching. And again, if you enjoy this show and you think there's vital information here that could be helpful to your friends and neighbors, please share it on your Facebook page.
Definitely share it. This had to have been good, wasn't it?
AniTa is priceless. We're so thankful that she joined us today and we appreciate her time and her service to our town. Thanks for watching and have a great day. God bless.